45 minutes, and I'll jump right in, and I'll also say that I'm planning on having this be an opportunity for us to do more interactivity, just like we did yesterday afternoon with the climate conversations. So you will be getting to know your partner. We'll actually be doing groups of 3 today. And if you are sitting by somebody that you know and you'd like to kind of use this opportunity in the session to get to know other people, feel free to mix it up as well. I'll give you kind of that pre-warning right now. But welcome to our discussion around from comfort zones to connections in our community. If I've done my job well here in the next 45 minutes, I have the following 3 learning goals that I really would like to laser in with all of you. We'll provide a chance to just a brief review of many, not all comprehensively, but many of the individual or societal factors that really are leading us to feel divided, isolated, separated, whatever that might be, kind of not really in a place of common belonging. We'll understand then the sense of, as CCL chapters, what we can do to work towards actually ensuring that sense of belonging in our shared work, even in a polarized time, even in a time that does have so many challenges in trying to work together across whatever divides we might be showing up in our groups with. And we're going to do that through getting to know each other as fellow CCL volunteers, co-creating solutions to improve how we're all building up our chapters. So there's going to be some brainstorming time, and then at the end, I want to make sure to save enough time to also share back to the larger group here. So a lot of this is done, or at least the first half is, I'm pulling from the work of our amazing tandem on staff. Drew Eyerly is our Conservative Outreach Director based out of Georgia. And Karina Ramirez, our amazing Diversity and Inclusion Director based out of Florida. They've put together a course that they debuted at the summer conference and then had a 4-session workshop throughout the summer called From Comfort Zone to Connections. Any people here in the room attend any of those sessions? Excellent. I thought I saw a few people. And obviously, if you were there with us in DC, you kind of saw the launch of that. So I'm going to give a very accelerated view of some of that coursework today for the first 15 minutes, and then we'll transition actually to a discussion that was put together by another regional conference. The Great Lakes, our neighbors just to the east, they engaged a lot on this belonging conversation just last weekend too. So this is in part based on the amazing work of our regional directors there, Elizabeth Dell and John Saban. So first off, just zooming out, what I think is really amazing about CCL, again, and I might be biased, is that I feel like we are an incredibly rare climate organization, not just because we're filled with people like you and I, but because what we're trying to do is something that I don't think a lot of other climate groups are engaging in. And that is that we're simultaneously trying to diversify in terms of working both across the aisle and being, true to our nonpartisan values, and also thinking about, as an organization, how we can be more representative and actually look with our volunteer base like the larger country looks. We know, even hearing from Kate, right, that monocultures are not ideal, that organic farming, that ecosystem management in general, diversity benefits all of us when we have multiple viewpoints pulled in, when we have multiple backgrounds pulled in, when we have multiple lived experiences and people from different walks of life working together. And that, I know we'll get into this a little bit more in the belonging section, but that's what we're trying to do here. And I think that it is incredibly unique. And it's also a goal for ours to be more successful and be more mindful about how we can do that as we're building up our chapters. So that's really kind of the orientation of what we're trying to come at this with. But stepping back for a moment, and again, for many of us, this is probably going to be review because it's social science, but just to kind of prime us, because we in our small groups are going to be talking about what makes us different, what brings us together. Here's a brief review that Drew and Karina have done on what leads us to our differences from the social psychology standpoint. So on the very surface level, we'll kind of go down the tip of the iceberg on down here. Oftentimes, the decisions we make in our lives, the decisions that our loved ones or our community members make, that's most visible, right? What people are choosing to say, act, or do is seen first. It's also then where the judgment that we might have for others is based off of. It's the visible part of the iceberg. It's what we can see and respond to or judge from other people's behaviors. And in turn, if we start going deeper, those decisions are based on individual perspectives. And so on the perspective level, we basically make decisions based on kind of an individual assessment that requires some kind of engagement with the situation that we're in. It allows us to make what we feel is an informed decision. And in turn, that perspective is built upon or layered, a very lattice layered cake on the values and morals that we bring into our life, into our interactions, into our world. So if we keep going down the iceberg, the values and the morals that we have shape how we feel or perceive the world on what we perceive to be right or wrong. And those morals, or that value system that each of us has, whether we're consciously or subconsciously navigating the world with it at times, is driven by the life experiences that we have embodied. The lessons that we've lived through, that we've learned from others, that have been taught to us, that have been instilled in our overall life. And the key thing here is that those life experiences aren't showing up in our day-to-day interactions, at least most often, right? Those are kind of subsurface. They're what each of us brings to our interactions, but they're really the root of our identity and both who we think of ourselves as well as who we think others are too. And inevitably, those are going to be radically different for each of us in this room, depending on all the different backgrounds that we come with. None of us have the same life experiences. And so a very brief summary kind of thinking about how our experiences, our life lived experiences can lead to the value set that we have. Those then lead to the perceptions that we have of the world, leading to the individual decisions that we're making every day, kind of building up this base of the iceberg all the way to what we're visibly seeing on top, which is obviously just the very tip of the iceberg. And I think that this is a really helpful graphic that Drew likes to highlight, which is just really the importance of perspective and realizing, obviously, depending on where you're at, things can look radically different. And yet clearly from us, the objective view on the cartoon here is that we can realize that they're both right. So that's really a brief review, a very condensed version of one whole hour of what one of their workshops was about. So let's also zoom in. So another one of their workshops, what they did was try to peel apart not only on the individual lived experience, but on the societal level, what is keeping us apart from each other and what makes organizing hard in the communities that we live in. How are we really trying, if our goal is diversifying and being representative of the communities that we live and are representing as we show up to DC, what are the factors that we're swimming against in really trying to accomplish that? Well, there's lots of societal divides. I don't have to tell anyone here about them, but let's just put them all on the slide for the sake of being overwhelmed. Political ideology, party affiliation, right? We're running upstream on that often. And CCL, we're really trying to say, it doesn't matter who you voted for, what your political views are, you are welcome here as long as you treat climate as a serious issue that you want to work to get together across the aisle to find solutions on. Social divisions, whether it's your age, your gender, your sexual identity, your sexual orientation, you name it, there's all sorts of different ways that people can be put into boxes or feel not represented based on kind of social factors you might be coming into the community with. Class, income inequality, economic disparity, education opportunities, housing situations, even social media and the algorithms that we have online to kind of continue to amplify or further polarize us. You name it, you can, I'm sure, add to this list much more fully. But what I'm really trying to do here is just highlight that, yes, each of these has an explanatory background on, what is causing kind of the divide. But the great thing is, regardless of where we're at in our communities, there is a very simple and focused way that we can put this on the side and say, yes, there are many divisions that might be present with who we are, but what we can come back to is the root of identifying a group culture that fosters a sense of belonging. That's kind of the common panacea of what we can do with each of our chapters amidst all of this, upstream challenges that create this sense of division that we can focus on. So that's really my pivot for the rest of this workshop, if you will, after a brief 10-minute review of a lot of that other background. And so what I'd like to do, I guess, is just invite you to start thinking about in your life, times outside of CCL, that can be CCL too if you want, but especially given that all of us have life experiences, and we've talked about life experiences being so formational, to who we are and how we experience the world or relate to other people around us. Thinking about life experiences that you've had where you did not feel like you belonged, that you did not feel welcome, that there was a moment where you really were in a place where the group that you were in, the situation you found yourself in, did not foster the sense of belonging. We're gonna have you start thinking about it. I'll model this right now, and then in a bit, we'll start thinking through this from a group perspective. But let's just start brainstorming. And for me, I can think of, I'm sure, a variety of them. But one I'll share actually that was very powerful. So I moved, so I'm a native Minnesotan, spent a lot of my life there, and then basically moved down to Texas in 2014. And it was partly because my now partner, my wife Julia, was already down there, and she convinced me to relocate. But it's also because I had the opportunity to go to a doctoral school at the University of Texas for public policy. And here I was, a young CCL group leader, fascinated by carbon pricing policy, wanting to kind of pursue the academic side of understanding it. And so there I was, Texas, Minnesota, pretty different cultures. We won't go into that. But the thing that sticks out to me is, this is a two-part story, by the way. So the first day we had been told that you come to class and you're pitching your dissertation. And my background's in education and psychology. I don't have a lot of, advanced modeling skills prior to this program. I don't have a lot of political science background even prior to this. And so I kind of put together this proposal that, I submitted as part of my application. I felt like, oh, it's going to be great. I'm talking about, I'm going to explore carbon pricing on the subnational and the international and the national level, and look at the, interface there. And so I give my talk. And I can just see people as I'm talking, and of course, everyone's nervous, but they're kind of, just snickering a little bit. It's like, oh, this is really impacting me. And so I sit down, and then the next person goes, and they're all just so much more advanced. The methodologies that they're talking about, the theories that they're bringing in, the style of scope of what they're going to be focusing on. And it's one of those moments where it's like, I do not belong at this level of caliber. Like, I am the imposter here. Who do I think I am pursuing this degree? They're going to figure this out. And I also figure out afterwards, people thought that my Minnesota accent that I don't have was very notable and distracting. And that was kind of getting in the way. And so that's part one of the story, right? Just kind of wanting to melt into my seat and realizing I had made a horrible mistake. What the heck was I doing in Texas? What did I, who was I kidding, getting this degree? I'm a fraud, whatever it is, we can all identify with some of those narratives. And then that's kind of where the day, well, we'll just end that day's narrative. But the wonderful thing, just like I'm sure for many of you in your stories, is that the story doesn't end there. And that through active engagement with all of these other cohort members, we started to set up having, a weekly study group, or, a daily coffee, or, breakfast time together, whatever it is. And I got to know these individuals that had been laughing at my accent, that had seemed so much more advanced than me, that brought back, had highlighted the skills that their backgrounds had that I didn't feel. And over the course of this next 4.5 years, we became so close. We were helping each other with our research. I still text and keep up with many of them on a monthly basis, even though I'm no longer in the area. And that sense of belonging is what held and stitched us together and made it possible for me to really succeed. Yes, there were other factors as well, but if I hadn't felt welcomed and connected to that cohort, I don't think I would have made it. I don't think I would have stuck around. I don't think that I would be who I am today. And so that goes to the heart of belonging and how each of us has a role to play in the chapters that we're helping be a part of and leading. And I don't have to tell you, outside of those individuals' experiences, as you've been listening to my story that are probably resonating with your lived experiences, the research backs this up hugely too, right? There are so many studies out there in the social science field that highlight the importance of belonging, and that sense of belonging helping improve our social connections, leading to the sense of being able to succeed better, academically speaking, for young adults especially. being able to perform better, more effectively on the job at work, being able to manage stress in our lives when things do go sideways, improving our own physical health, lowering risk for mental health conditions that all of us might face without that sense of belonging. And then also the importance of just zooming out and realizing in CCL, we have the opportunity to model what this can look like to our larger community, to really highlight people from a diverse set of backgrounds working together and making a difference on an issue that matters to all of us. So hopefully that's a good pitch to thinking about why belonging matters and why that's really the tip of the spear today and what we'll be focusing on in this diversity inclusion section for your discussion. So what I'd like to do is this. What I'd like to do is just review with you on the next 3 slides, questions that I'll have on the screen for the next 15 minutes. And each slide, I'd like you and your group of 3 to take about 5 minutes to converse with each other on. So the first slide here is just getting to know each other a little bit more. Introductions. Who are you? Especially if you might not know who your partners are. What do you have in common? Exploring what makes you different. And then also talking about bringing in that value set again. What is it that you think the value you have that drives you most to being engaged on climate change, to coming down all the way to this regional conference to be a part of our experience together this weekend? That's the first 5 minutes. Then let's transition to unpacking some of this belonging discussion. What was it for you where you had a time where you didn't belong, or you felt you didn't belong? And then also, is there an arc to your story? Is it that story, or is there another moment where you felt that you didn't belong initially, but then through someone welcoming you, through your own actions, whatever it is, you became part of the group and you no longer experienced that dissonance? You were folded in and had that sense of belonging. And then the last 5 minutes, and again, if we have a little bit more time, that's fine too. Maybe we'll even do 6 minutes for each of these. I'll keep us posted. And when you hear me talking between them, then just know that I'm shifting us to the next section. But I'd like us to think about how much do you feel welcomed or have a sense of belonging in CCL or at a conference this weekend? Whatever level of openness or vulnerability you feel comfortable in your small group, let's really explore that. And then let's think through what reasons may people have for not feeling like they belong in CCL through your experiences in your chapter. And again, we're thinking about this through all of that list of social and individual factors. We're really thinking about this from any of those areas where the divisions within us might keep us feeling apart or not like we have a role to play. And then lastly, and this is the part that I'm going to be taking notes when we get back to our large group from our small groups. What could you do, or largely what could CCL do, to ensure that people feel more welcome and to help create and foster that sense of belonging for others in your chapter, in CCL nationally, you name it? Big questions. I'm sure we'll figure all of this out in the next 18 minutes together. And I'm reasonably confident that looking at this amazing group of people assembled, that this is the group that's going to get us there. So again, as a review, we've got 3 slides. Let's do about 5 to 6 minutes for each of these. And I'd like to have it be groups of 3. That way it's really a big chance for you to get to know other people. And at the end, we'll reconvene and have a chance to share out for another 5-10 minutes. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, when you hear my voice, know that you can switch, but let's do the first 5 to 6 minutes on introductions. Let's go. All right, so by my math, there was 15 groups. And that means that there was 15 amazing conversations. I don't know if anyone else took the time to kind of zoom out, but every single group was engaged. It was like really one of the highlights of the weekend for me right now, just seeing all the discussions. And so what I'd like to do, rather than having this kind of be a popcorn affair, I'd like to actually just ask that each group think about one person that they'd like to have share a summary of takeaways or things that really stood out for your group. And we've got just enough time then to basically have 1 minute for each group. And I'll help keep us on track here. And if you go a little bit shorter than that, that's fine too. But just think about, maybe you want to turn to your group really quick. Think about who'd like to be the one speaking. And then we'll go around the horn.
And I'm actually gonna pass. Perfect. All right, so I'm gonna pass it to Paul here first. Oh, to Phil, perfect. And my only request is, please make sure to talk into the mic, because we are a big group and sometimes hard to hear each other. So feel free to pass this around. I'll play the time roll and the note taker, and we'll start here with Phil's group, and then raise your hand if your group's next.
1 minute.
All right. So, Jackie, Paul and I were talking and I got nothing. No, I have a really hard time remembering things from like 30 seconds ago, so I'm making this up like that. But I think we talked about the fact that we're all very different, but yet we have different ways of approaching things. And I did like Jackie's story of inviting 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats to her house for a meal that they didn't know each other. And this was a pretty recent thing, right? On Monday. And said it was an amazing event. So that kind of really falls into the bringing in belonging and making people who separate themselves from each other come together and realize that, yeah, we got a lot in common.
And Phil's from Canada and he's conservative. Yeah. That was a big deal.
Just raise your hands. Yeah, you wanna go or? Okay. Watch running. Youth rights, you're gonna agree.
Okay, so I was in a group with Jane, Jeff, and it was myself, and we talked about how there have been many times in our lives when we haven't felt like we belonged, but we really like CCL because we feel like we can go up to anybody and just spark a conversation, and we really like how the regional conference allows us to get more interpersonal connections. And then one thing we talked about was chapter development from where we are from and how sometimes there's difficulties getting people to come, getting people to stay and not just be on the email list. And one really cool point that Jeff made was, he said you are responsible for you're not responsible for the results, only the efforts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we're gonna try to remind ourselves that we can do all the efforts, but at the end of the day, we have to realize we can only do so much, and we're really only responsible for the effort that we put in, but the results are up to other factors.
Get it, show up.
Great point.
Nice.
No.
Yeah, please.
We didn't get through all of the questions, so I don't know if I have great answers, but the part that we did talk about was
Microphone closer.
all of our stories on belonging or not belonging, and it did become quickly apparent that it was super important for both of us in grad school and this work to feel belonging, to do your best, to want to be working in that place, to have a quality of life, all those things. So. I've got stuff on my lap, so yeah. Okay, there were 3 of us. We had Jackie, who's young, and then Kathy and me are old. We were all white women, so we didn't feel very diverse, but that was the perspective that we had. And I don't know, what did we say? We kind of like Phil, I forgot everything. CCL, we feel like CCL gives us a real sense of belonging. We're kind of with our peeps. It was pointed out that we think that some people maybe don't get involved because they don't feel like they're not very confident in their ability to talk about and do what we're doing. So I guess that's my question as a chapter leader. How do I, go about doing that? I really like Jackie's idea of getting a bunch of people that are maybe don't know each other and kind of, yeah, so good for that.
Thank you.
So. Emily's work as naturalist in, working with grasslands in Brookings, South Dakota, with a lot of varied people in the group she works in. And Anne is a group lead in SD1. And I work in Albert Lea, so, yeah, so we're kind of seeing that as potential. So wondering how to kind of continue your involvement, so, yeah, I'm looking at you.
Lively discussion, and it was very fruitful. We got down to the punchline of what could you do to ensure people feel welcome, after talking about experiences where we hadn't felt welcome over our careers. And Peter told us that his wife calls the people in their chapter the day before the meeting. And, you know, I think that's a real important thing to make people feel welcome and belonging. And then I remembered, when Lene used to hold meetings at her house, she always had a lot of food. You know, and I always liked that. And we also did stupid games afterwards. And, you know, and it was kind of like, I didn't want to miss it, because, you know, we were probably gonna do something really fun. So that's what I got.
We had a pretty good discussion about, you know, how everybody is different and everybody is similar. And everybody always finds ways that they don't belong. And we kind of brought together our respect and love of nature and of society and of people. And I myself have moved around a lot. And I've kind of have found this belonging and not belonging. I've been kind of the outlier on a lot of things, especially here at Lakeside. I'll be here till the end of August. And I have an artistic background. A lot of people here are scientists. And we talked about the power of storytelling and the power of art. And one of my big things that I found is a big change in the way that we have our outlook on life is I try to celebrate differences. And because we talked a lot about how much we respect the nonpartisanship of the CCL and how powerful that is and how powerful that has been in bringing people together. Of saying, despite all these differences, despite all these other things we can recognize and look at and talk about, we still are here for a very specific reason. And to each of us, they're all unique.
So I was grouped with Paul and Muniz, and they're both immigrants. So I was the outsider of our group, being a native Minnesotan. I think we talked a bit about how CCL welcomes people by listening, which may be different from other advocacy groups. So we really appreciate that about CCL. I think the other thing Muniz mentioned was just, you know, you can make people feel more welcome by showing that you care about them. Even if you don't see the world the same way, if you care about them as a person, that will make them feel welcome.
I grew with Peter and Brian and myself. I'm in a feedback zone. We didn't get very far because we spent most of the time talking about how Brian doesn't feel very comfortable with his coworkers. I think the opposite. No, we did have a couple of different stories about starting new jobs and feeling like we didn't fit in. But then in the long run, it all turned out to be much better than we expected going in. So that was true from Brian. He really loves people. You need to explain. Well, he's a CCL staff person. And in case you didn't get that. So, and, of course, the conversation was wide ranging. We had a lot of good examples, but CCL overall, especially a group like this, is always been so very welcoming to all of us. And, a common thread is that we come into this oftentimes not really knowing what to do, but we want to do something. And that there's vehicles here, and there's, if you're willing to, ask, or maybe stupidly say yes, there's things you can do when you came in feeling a little bit hopeless, so that's a great story.
Yeah, the privilege of having one of the people from the panel last night in our group. And so we spent quite a bit of time talking about the differences between the young people and those of us who have more gray hair. And one of the dilemmas that I brought to that was many of us who've been around with this for a long time have many friends here, have been to Lakeside long times before, and so we're an in crowd. And when someone like younger members show up here, how do we bridge that? How do we make sure we bridge that? So that's something I think we were conscious of and think we want to work together to make happen. One thing that we spoke about was recognizing our common goal and bringing that forward for all of us to bridge over all this other stuff that we're working on. I'd say carbon fee and dividends, and so putting that together, different expertises, different personal experiences, different ages, we're going the same place. So.
So, being an old guy, I can't remember what we talked about, but I do want to thank Linda and Scott for a great conversation. What struck me is how I felt when we were talking about the experience of not belonging and that sense of vulnerability, which actually binds us together. In fact, we're all here because we feel vulnerable. And it's a great actually way to help people feel welcome if you express your own vulnerability.
I work with Gail and Richard back here. Similar to this group back here, we kind of picked up on the age theme and really proud of like I said last night, really proud and heartwarming that we have these 4 young adults that joined us with this group. But I would imagine, and they've been very adult-like in all of their interactions and seem very comfortable with us. They seem welcome, at least visually, they seem like they feel welcome. But I can certainly imagine that maybe they have some uneasiness about being the minority in terms of, they're just a few young adults in a room full of mostly great people. So we talked a little bit about how maybe can CCL encourage more participation, recruit more, be strategic about recruiting more at those high school and college and recent graduate levels, so that we get more diversity, at least as far as age goes, within our ranks, whether they're paying members or they just volunteer and participate. So a few specific ideas that we had. It's great CCL make some efforts to get people to regional and national conferences, maybe increase those efforts, help fund people to get to DC. Those are life-changing experiences, and we could use their help there. Maybe more recruitment at the local chapter levels, tabling at universities and schools, those kinds of things. And I thought it would be wonderful for a little merch, turn these stripes into a circular display, make frisbees out of them, and then put our message on the frisbees. And when we hand them out, or when we table at colleges, and we get somebody that's really maybe enthusiastic about CCLs, here, take this frisbee, play it with your friends, and that'll maybe generate some more conversation.
Well, I'm Rob, and I was with Terry and we talked about a number of things, but I think one of the key points that Terry made is One of the key points that Terry made is that, we need to welcome people. It does take time as group leaders. And it means, reaching out, trying to individually meet with people. And that's hard because that takes time, and many of us are all volunteers, very busy. So thinking about that challenge, thinking about the challenge of having people who really take ownership of CCL as opposed to people who are involved in lots of different ways, right? Trying to find more people who can do that is probably important for the growth of the organization. Then the other thing is, I think we just talked about the kind of the pressure of trying to grow the group as fast as possible, because the climate issue isn't getting better, right? So there is an urgency to doing that. So those are some of our thoughts.
Thanks, Rob.
We're talking about belonging and the difficulties we've had in life with belonging or getting invited into groups. Roger had Indigenous friends when he was a young person. And the families didn't mix, but he mixed on the school ground and maybe out in some field where someone else owned it, and maybe he shouldn't have been. That's what I would have done as a kid, but he had some good friends growing up. Chris mentioned that she moved twice as a child. One time she didn't make any friends because she was younger and shy, and a few years later she moved again and she got invited in, so that it sounds like the first time in 3-4 years she actually had friends to play with that she could depend on and share things with in life. And I'm forgetting again. Debbie on there. But she mentioned she was here last year at the North Winds in Dakota, and that she and the friend she came with kind of kept to themselves and showed up and listened, and went to the next event and listened, and they weren't as involved in mixing. And maybe this year's sounds like it's different, partly because she's more familiar with CCL, but also that she's more at ease and able to engage with people for that reason. And I'm not a people person. I engage on subjects more. So until a subject comes up, I mostly just stand there myself.
Either that way or that way. Hi, I'm Sharon, and my group is with Mary Ann and Patrick. And when we talk about differences, we kind of came up with those really quickly, which is what we talk about. We've got Iowa, Minnesota, Democrats, Republicans, rural and city. But what we quickly came together, when you can always find something you come together on, is they're both very bright and emoji, and kind of talking about our purpose, just about what CCL is doing and nature. And I could tell they loved it, that I loved, just this setting. And so that quickly came on a quick bonding. We also talked about, they're both very, very new to CCL, like just now. And me, very, very new just this year. But we talked about what are some things that could be intimidating. And it was interesting when we listened to the panel yesterday, and they brought up scary. And scary isn't even just high school. It's like, joining CCL, I couldn't believe how smart everybody was, all new writers and have every single acronym memorized, and they talk in these terms, and you can somewhat join a group like that and feel intimidated. And it's this group over here. Terry was my our group coordinator, new members, and she called me, and I think that's key. So you suddenly have a connection that, so if you feel kind of dumb, you can kind of reach out to somebody and they kind of make it not so feeling dumb. But having said that, what we said also was this whole group, it attracts a type of person That is just really nice and really inclusive, and I think that's why we get a lot of things done at CCL, so.
I know we went long, but I think it was worth it. Thank you all so much, and I'll just highlight that in the packet of all of the slide decks and everything that Mindy's gonna be sharing with everyone after this. We'll also make sure to put a link where if you're interested in more of the work that Drew and Karina are doing based on our session today, we'll have a way for you to sign up. But thank you for your wisdom, and Mindy, do you wanna just give a 5-minute, 10-minute break? What do you think?